I went camping alone last winter with my dog Roscoe, and it's something I'll never do again. I had taken a few days off work and wanted to get away from people completely. I loaded my truck with my gear and drove up a long, narrow trail into the state forest. The road was barely maintained, covered in packed snow and ice, and there were no other cars. After driving for almost an hour, I parked at a small pull-off that looked long unused. From there, I hiked 20 minutes with my pack and Roscoe until reaching a small clearing. It was surrounded by thick trees. The snow was deep and untouched, and everything felt isolated. There were no footprints or any signs of people being around recently, which was exactly what I wanted. I set my pack down, cleared a spot for the tent, and let Roscoe wander while I worked. He stayed close, sniffing the snow and trees, sometimes jumping around and playing like nothing was wrong. I pitched the tent, staked it down hard because the ground was frozen solid and unforgiving. Inside, I laid out my sleeping pad and winter-rated bag, knowing it would be brutally cold. The temperature would drop well below freezing, so I layered properly and kept everything close at hand. Thermal base layers, thick socks, a fleece, and a heavy jacket stayed on even after camp was set. Once the tent was ready, I gathered dead wood nearby and built a small, simple fire pit. I started a fire and let it burn down until I had a steady, manageable flame for cooking. I cooked dinner over it, nothing fancy, and sat on a log eating while Roscoe lay nearby. The woods were quiet in that deep winter way where sound feels muted, almost non-existent everywhere around. My dad had taught me long ago that snow actually absorbs sound, making the world strangely muffled. After I ate, Roscoe suddenly jumped up and started barking sharply toward the dark line of trees. It didn't worry me much at first because deer were everywhere out there, and he'd barked before. I told him to relax, and after a minute, he calmed down and sat back near the fire. I checked the time and decided I would stay up a bit longer before finally turning in. I always carried a handgun when camping in remote places, and it was holstered at my side. With that in the fire, I felt fine at that point, not really thinking anything was wrong. About 20 minutes later, Roscoe started barking again, louder this time, his body tense and focused. Then I heard it too. Footsteps moving through the snow somewhere out in the surrounding woods. I stood up and listened carefully. The steps stopped, then started again, pacing through the darkness. Roscoe went from barking to a low, steady growl and then suddenly went silent, unnervingly still. He stared straight ahead toward the trees without moving, and that was when I finally felt uneasy. I followed his gaze and saw a shape standing at the edge of the tree line, barely visible. Someone was there, half hidden in the darkness, just faintly lit by the flickering light of my fire. I called out, said he had scared me, and told Roscoe it was okay to calm him. The figure didn't move at first, just stood there silently, watching from the edge of camp. Then he stepped forward slightly, enough for me to see it was a man in winter clothes. He asked what I was doing out there so deep in the woods, and his tone wasn't friendly. I told him I was just getting out into nature with my dog and enjoying some solitude. He didn't answer right away, just stood there staring, and I could feel the situation turning bad. I told him calmly that I was armed, hoping it would discourage anything stupid or unpredictable from happening. The man laughed slightly and said, instead of threatening him, I should invite him and show hospitality. Then he turned without another word and walked back into the darkness, footsteps fading into the woods. I stood there for a long time after, staring into the trees, feeling exposed and completely alone. Roscoe stayed close by my side, clearly unsettled, his attention fixed on the dark tree line around us. I didn't like any of it, but eventually I forced myself to believe that the guy was gone. I put out the fire carefully, throwing snow on it, and stirring the ashes until nothing glowed. I didn't want any light or smoke drawing attention to where we were camped for the night. I crawled into the tent, zipped it completely, and sealed it up like a fragile fabric fortress. Inside, I focused on staying warm and safe, doing everything possible to keep my body heat. I laid the sleeping pad to block the frozen ground from draining warmth straight out of me. I stayed fully dressed, pulled on a knit hat, and cinched the sleeping bag tightly around shoulders. I kept one hand warmer near my core and another pushed down near my feet for extra warmth. Roscoe curled against me, and his body heat helped more than anything else inside that thin shelter. I lay there listening to the woods, or really the heavy silence pressing in from every direction. After a while, Roscoe started growling again, low and constant, his body tense against my side. Then I heard what he was reacting to. Footsteps in the snow, slow and deliberate outside. They stopped and Roscoe went quiet, but his ears stayed perked, muscles tight, ready to explode. Then the footsteps started again, closer this time and slower than before, circling with awful patience. They came right up to the tent and stopped directly beside us, inches away through thin fabric. Roscoe erupted into loud howling. I whispered for him to stop, terrified of drawing even more attention. When he finally went quiet, he dropped back into a low growl, teeth bared toward the tent wall. Whoever it was just stood there outside. I heard subtle shifting, weight moving slightly in snow. I already had my gun in my hand, but didn't want to start shouting or issuing direct threats. I didn't want to be forced into following through because I had never actually shot anyone. I honestly don't think I have it in me to kill someone, even if cornered in self-defense. Finally, I couldn't take the tension anymore. I cocked the gun and spoke clearly into the dark. I said I had a gun and that whoever was there needed to leave immediately and walk away. Realistically, who else could it have been besides that creepy guy who'd appeared earlier by camp? There was silence for a few long seconds that felt like minutes while I held my breath. Then footsteps again, moving away from the tent, slow at first, then faster into the woods. I didn't unzip the tent or even try to look out. I just stayed frozen where I was. Roscoe remained fully alert the entire time, which was the only reason I felt remotely safe. Eventually, pure exhaustion pulled me into short bursts of sleep. Without him there, I wouldn't have slept. I barely slept at all, drifting off only in brief, shallow bursts before snapping awake in fear. When the sky finally began to lighten, I packed up as fast as possible at first daylight. We hiked back to the truck quickly, not stopping or relaxing until we saw the vehicle ahead. I loaded everything, got in, and drove away from that place without looking back even once. I never went back to that part of the woods again, and I know I never, ever will. Creeps like that guy make life truly scary and remind you that you can never drop your guard.